Hey folks, today's video is going to be about Europa Universalis V because Johan, kind of out of nowhere like the mad lad he is, actually confirmed today that we will be getting a start date earlier in EU5 than EU4. And as a lot of people have kind of figured out from the screenshots we got already, it is going to be in 1337 and it is going to be the 1st of April. So it's not an April Fool's. It is actually when the start date is going to be. And he did actually do a really good post on the forums about why they are choosing this, because there's been a lot of back and forth in the community about, well, I want it to be exactly when EU4 started. And other people say, no, it'd be more interesting if it was earlier. There's a lot of cool things going on. And we'll talk about that later on in the video. But let's just go through the reasons as to why. And I think a lot of these are really good reasons. First of all, it starts before the Black Death, which creates an early game challenge. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but you didn't really have any disease mechanics in EU4, do you? As I've said in previous videos, I've not played for a while, so I could be wrong. There could be something in there, some events that kind of work that way, but it does sound like we're going to get an actual Black Death that takes effect across the whole game and really causes an early game, as it says, challenge. Now, one thing I will say, and this kind of leads on to other things, the only worry I have is if there's no other start date, which I'm sure if it is not there for launch will be there later on, is because of this start date, I think the world will change so much by the time we get round to the colonial era and kind of the era that EU4 set in, that I do worry a little bit that games will go a little bit crazy. Very much like in CK3, if you start in the early start date, when you get to 1066, the map very rarely looks like the pre-done map for 1066. And that is my only worry looking at these is the world going to change so much? Because think of the start date of EU4, the map is not super set, but the main European nations and things like that are kind of bulked out. There's not really that much border gore and map gore that could occur really easily. Whereas I think if it's 1337, there's a chance that could happen. Again, we don't know how it's going to work. I'm sure it's going to work out fine. They've obviously thought about it. But that would be really my only worry, is that once you get up to the colonial era, how different is the map going to be? Is Portugal going to be there to do their Portuguese stuff? The same with the Dutch. The same with England. Are they going to be able to build these huge colonial lands as they do in EU4 most of the time? But again, we'll cross that road, obviously, when we come to it. The second one here, France's system of feudal loyalty is tested as Edward III is about to embark on the 100 Years' War. So this is one really huge benefit of this early time frame. We're going to get things like the 100 Years' War, these big conflicts that we haven't seen in Europa Universalis before. There's still a colony in Greenland is a third one. And then obviously everyone's favourite, there will be a big Byzantium, but the Ottomans are about to expand. So imagine an early game, a lot of players are going to play as the Byzantine and try and hold off against the Ottomans. I'm sure it's going to be very difficult to do so, but it does sound like we're going to get a little bit more of an early conflict there as they'll try claim what they think should be theirs. The Rise of the Timur is about to happen, so again, something else that's just about to kick off when the game starts. Some powers are at their zenith, but facing big challenges such as Mali and Delhi. Again, these realms are very much like the Byzantine, where if you're playing as them, you're going to be playing on that defensive foot and trying to survive a little bit, which again is different to anything we've seen in EU4 really for those countries. Some others are just at their start, such as the Aztecs. So again, these nations that are going to be smaller than we see them, obviously in EU4, are going to be able to expand. I imagine have some really cool campaigns with those, kind of growing them as much as you can. They get to model the transition from feudalism to modern states. This is again something that they've really got to nail down well. How are the game mechanics going to change? Because obviously in 1337, a lot of feudalism still there. How are they going to do it where nations are becoming modern states, having those apparatus, parliaments, things like that? How are they going to do that and make it look realistic? That is, again, something that until we see more information about, maybe has me slightly worried. But again, I'm sure they've put a lot of thought into it. They get to model the transition from feudal levies to standing armies. That one probably a little bit more easy. You can go from the men-at-arms system in CK3 to a proper standing army, but it is, again, quite a sizable change. New institutions are blooming in Italy and the rest of Europe, such as the Renaissance or banking. For this one, we've had systems like that in EU4 already, but I'm sure they're going to rework them, make them better. What I will say is if you're an EU4 player and you've never played Crusader Kings, I wouldn't worry too much about how are they going to do these systems and things like that too much, because going from CK2 to CK3, the studio, I know it's a different studio, but it is all part of Paradox. They said, we don't want to just copy-paste things from CK2 into CK3. We want to put an extra spin on them, really flesh out some of these systems like disease and things like that just came to CK3. And I would say 9 times out of 10, they've absolutely knocked it out of the park. The systems are just so much better than they were in CK2. So I wouldn't worry too much about, oh, these systems, how they're going to work in this kind of game, because I think they have learned a lot over the last, 10 or 15 years, definitely since the launch of Europa Universalis V, that I think they're going to be able to put a much better spin on some of these mechanics and cut down on a lot of the bloat that EU4 had. But with that said, let's get on to the next one. The HRE is in a moment of change, with 3 dynasties competing for it and the Golden Bull not yet enacted. So again, the HRE is going to be a bit more interesting. So a lot more factions in there, and I would imagine, the 3 main ones there, you could play as either of them. Try forge the HRE in your image and see how that plays out. The Catholic Church is at its height. The military orders are crusading in northeastern Europe and the Mediterranean, but the Pope resides in Avignon, which will lead to the Western Schism with Rome, which again is going to be a change from EU4. We're going to get a good period of crusading still happening, and I can imagine some events where crusading ends roughly when it did historically, but maybe you could rework it and just carry on the crusades for centuries and centuries and kind of see how the world would play out if that continued. And that could bring some interesting alt histories and things like that. Maybe they go crusading into, the Americas or something crazy like that. England's control in the Isles is waning as Bruce loyalists press the advantage in the Scottish Wars of Independence, and the Gaelic Irish chieftains begin to reclaim large tracts from English lordship. Meanwhile, the seeds of the last great Welsh rebellion are being sown. So, as they always say, England is one of the most popular areas to play on the map, and this gives, again, another spin on what you can be getting up to there. Whereas if they just started at EU5, the same as now, you obviously wouldn't have seen these kind of dynamics happening at the very start of the game. An intricate balance of power in Iberia between the Christian kingdoms and the last Muslim foothold. So again, Iberia is going to be really interesting to play in. It's not just going to be Portugal, Spain, and, it's super set as it is in EU4. A different balance of power in regions such as Eastern Europe, the Middle East, Southeast Asia. Again, making these places a little bit more interesting to play than in EU4. And then the Golden Horde and then successors of Eurasia from the Mediterranean to the Pacific, all the steppe hordes, all that area of the map, again, should be a little bit more interesting, a little bit more going on, and a little bit more replayability maybe in those areas. But this was the post, again, ending the speculation. I think they probably just got tired of everyone going I think it's 1337, look, this map looks like this. If you trace over this map from then, it looks correct. And I guess Johan was like, look, let's just tell them it's correct. Let's just end this. We don't want people just asking about it constantly. And then it's good that he went into these reasons as to why. And these are only some of them. Obviously, there's a bunch more reasons, I'm sure, that they chose this era. And I think doing that progression from feudalism to modern states, getting a bit more game time before colonialism properly happens, is going to be interesting. I'm pretty hyped for this change. Now, I have seen online on Reddit and, Twitter and other places, other content creators, I have seen that maybe they're not super happy about it. They're thinking, well, when I play now, people want to see colonialism. They want to see what happens with Portugal. They want me to, reclaim the Byzantine Empire from that one tiny bit that they still have when the game launches and things like that. And I can see that. I can see how you have this way of I play EU4 for this period in history. And then with them saying it's 1337, I don't want to play in Crusader Kings kind of time frame. I want to play at the birth of modern nations, which is where EU4 is kind of set up at. Like I say, I can see from both ways, but I'm looking at it yeah, they could have redone the game at the exact same place. But then, aren't you bored of that? I'm not telling you that you should be bored of it, but you've played EU4 for however long, and you've played out these events so many times, and yeah, you maybe still enjoy them, and, you might still enjoy them for another 10 years. But for me, I think it's cool that when the game starts, there's going to be all these different new stories you can tell while still playing a Europa Universalis style game if you don't enjoy Crusader Kings, or even seeing this spin on how that time frame plays out in EU5 rather than Crusader Kings, because obviously the game's going to play very differently. They're not just going to be you play Crusader Kings style UI and gameplay, and then once you flip over to a modern nation, you suddenly play Europa Universalis. All these systems are going to work roughly in a similar way early on. Obviously, they're going to change and expand, and there's going to be a lot of dynamism in how it updates, because obviously, as they say, you're going from feudalism to the modern nation, so systems are obviously going to change, but you're going to have that style of gameplay through the whole thing by the looks of it. So anyway, let me know what you think in the comments down below. I know there'll be people on both sides of this who want the old start date and ones who are happy about the new start date. What I will say is I do hope later on in the game development, we do get a start date later on. I imagine from what they've said, it is going to launch with this one start date. And that makes sense. I know people do want both. As I said, it would be cool in the future. But the amount of work they've got to do, it's not as easy as just repaint the map and you're good to go. They've obviously got to rebuild all these systems. set it up in a good way for that time frame and, you know, work on it like that. So it's not going to launch, I don't think, with both. It'll launch with this new start date, and then maybe in the future we'll get a later one. Well, I'd be very surprised if we don't, if I'm honest. I would be amazed if we don't later on get a Birth of Colonialism start date. And the people who just want to play that kind of time frame can just play from then, and, you know, good times, everyone can enjoy whatever they want. But as I said, let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if there's any events that you're now kind of super excited to see play out in this versus the old start date. And also, I suppose, have you any worries about it? Is there anything that you think could potentially trip them up? We all know Crusader Kings has done quite well, I think. I think overall the Crusader Kings player base is happy. Sure, they would like more flavor, but overall I'm really happy with Crusader Kings 3. It's such an improvement on CK2. I know that's going to be a hot take for some of you as well, but, you know, what do you think about this change from EU4 to EU5? And, you know, are you happy about it? Or, you know, what are you looking forward to? Just let me know in the comments down below. We'll have a chat about it as always. But on that note, like I said, it was just going to be a really quick video just to cover this because this does confirm the new start date. So hit that like button, subscribe if you're new here. I'm covering the Project Caesar / secretly EU5 Tinto talks up to when it gets officially announced. Like I say, probably at PDXCon, I imagine. And then obviously the dev diaries up to launch and beyond I'll be doing on the channel. I am usually found playing Crusader Kings. I used to play EU4 back in the day, and the kind of coverage I am going to be doing, if you are interested, is either from a new player perspective, or if you're like me, like a lapsed player. I played up to about 2 or 3 years ago, and then like just the bloat and all these different systems. It just got too much for me. I found I wasn't enjoying the game as much, and Crusader Kings 3 launched, so I just kind of went to play Crusader Kings 3 a lot more. So I'm going to be covering the game in that kind of aspect. There's plenty of channels out there who are very much more experts in Europa Universalis, but that's not really what I'm going to be about on this channel. I want to kind of learn the game as we go along, and then when the game launches, we've hopefully learned how the game plays a little bit, see how it's changed from EU4, and then we can enjoy it when it launches and see what happens and all that good stuff. But anyway, as I said, we'll leave it there for today. As always, I'll see you in the next one.